I'm going to go on the assumption that not everybody knows everything about this screwy contest, the Ham Radio Olympics. And incidentally, I hope you're impressed. I wore my referee shirt and my referee lanyard here. In 2 slides, I can tell you everything you need to know about WRTC. In this first slide, you need the organizers to put together somewhere between 50 and 70 stations that look like this. Exactly identical stations, the same antennas, the same towers, the same tents, the same generators, the same 100-watt limitation, and the same topography. And so here the photo shows just, an absolute classic example of what a WRTC site should look like. Imagine, though, the logistics of putting 50 to 70 of these sites together. And then second slide, the other ingredient is top operators. 2 top operators from each country, these guys happen to be Russian operators, are selected to man each one of those tents. And so there are, during the 24 hours of the contest, 50 to 70 pairs of ops that look just like these guys in their separate, exactly co-equal stations. And you remember, of course, that this WRTC is layered in with or on top of the IARU Radio Sport Team Championship or Radio Sport Championship contest. And so there are thousands of guys already contesting all around the world for the 24 hours. And thrown into the mix are these additional 50 to 70 stations, 2 operators each with really strange special call signs. And so that's it. 50 to 70 equal sites that look like this, 50 to 70 pairs of operators, each representing a country, going like mad for 24 hours to see who gets the gold, who gets the silver, who gets the bronze. This is probably the closest thing to absolutely fair that you could ever imagine in a radio competition. Now, these photos happen to be from Russia. I was lucky enough to go in 2010, and this was the tent site that I was assigned to about 40 miles south of Russia. And these are the 2 guys that I was assigned to referee. The classic WRTC operation, and the Italian operation was not quite classic, starts with an opening ceremony, very nationalistic, with, as you can see here at the ceremony in Russia, teams sporting their signs, entering a big hall to music and introductions, all the flags displayed, fantastic musical and dance entertainment in connection with the opening ceremony, more of the dancers, good organization. There was never in Russia during the event any question about what to do, where to go, what your responsibilities were. And then eventually on Saturday, we get to the sites, which again look like this. Every site equal, so the contest could not be more fair. And every site has a site manager or a site sponsor. We had those in Italy. You'll see my guys. And these are the guys that took care of the site in Russia. And this fellow had driven, in the orange shirt, had driven about 1,000 miles in his Honda CRV to volunteer to take care of just this one site. And they barbecued and cooked for us over the weekend. You see RA4LW there also. So it was fun, made some friends, and that's a tremendous way to host a site. These guys were wonderful for us. Got to meet a lot of dignitaries. These are all politically very important Russian amateurs and politicians. Competition starts, and these guys don't know their call signs until 15 minutes before the competition begins. I think you can see there they drew Romeo 36 Oscar. But until the referee pulls the envelope out of the wallet 15 minutes ahead of time, they don't know what their call sign is going to be. And that's done to prevent letting your countrymen know who you are and what your call sign is, and for them to work you disproportionately. During the competition in Russia, there was TV coverage. There was a constant stream of dignitaries coming to that antenna while these guys were operating. Here, you can't tell from the back, but this is Dave Sumner, K1ZZ, the CEO of ARRL, who stopped by our tent. Pretty exciting for all of us. And Dave went around and stopped by all 70 of the sites that look just like this. Then when the event's all over, you've made new friends. These are the guys for whom I refereed, and Dorothy. And these guys were wonderful. The guy on the left was just finishing up a PhD in physics. The one on the right was working on a master's degree in electrical engineering. And the guy on the right, Anton, invited me to his wedding. We made such good friends. I couldn't go. It was a little far, but those are the friendships that form. And here I am, lucky enough to be standing with the winners. These are the guys that got the gold. And the fellow on the right, Alex, had been previously to PJ2T. He brought his girlfriend with him to PJ2T. They got pregnant in Curacao, and years later, Alex winds up winning the gold in WRTC 2010. Closing ceremony is as fancy as the opening ceremony, with again fabulous music, indescribable food and fellowship at the ceremony. Everything absolutely first class. So that's WRTC, Ham Radio Olympics, every 4 years. But again, it comes down to a bunch of separate sites in the countryside, exactly identical sites, manned by 2 people from each country. And those 2 people are supposedly the best qualified for that 4-year segment to represent their nations. And the logistics were fantastic in Russia. This is a taxi on the last day. And the organizers just asked us, where do you need to go? Are you going to this airport or that airport? There are 2 of them in Moscow. You're going somewhere else. And we had made arrangements to stay for another week in Moscow in a hotel. It's a long drive. And the guy snapped his fingers and a taxi materialized in about 2 minutes, loaded up our bags and drove us all the way to our hotel in Moscow. No charge. This has all been arranged by the event. So it can be a fantastic experience to make new friends, see new places, and learn something by watching the world's best operators. Got to see all the sights, experienced my dream of seeing Red Square, and there's an exemplary WRTC. The Russian organizers could not have done anything better. Now, fast forward 13 years, which is what you finally asked me to talk about. And here, Dorothy and I going out the door to Italy, where, again, I was fortunate enough to be selected to be a referee. And we went about 11 days early to go see some sites. So this is June 24, and we're heading out the door from our condo. And we already talked about this. Not only did we get to ride the A380, but turns out that airplane, Dallas to London, tracked dead over top of my place in Ohio, dead over top of Kent State University, where I've worked since 1980 and still work part-time. And darn, I couldn't stop and see anybody. Dawn over the mid-Atlantic, on the ground in Heathrow, headed for Bologna. And finally on the ground in Bologna now on Monday. This is 26th of June, fully a week and 2 days before the radio event. And we rented a car. I'll just give you the quick travel log. The myth about Italian driving is wrong. The stereotype is wrong. It's organized, it's sedate, the people are courteous, it's not insane. I had worked in Italy back in the 1980s, and it was insane. And driving in Italy at that time was a survival battle. But we pulled this rental car and drove it for the duration, 800 or so miles, and had a grand time. One morning, it's Wednesday morning, we hopped on the bullet train, 37 minutes, Bologna to Florence for €9, about $9.60, at speeds of about 150 miles an hour. Unbelievable. Saw the sights obligatory sites in Venice. A couple of days later, went to Padova, parked the car, fed the meter a whole bunch of coins that morning, hopped on the train, went to Venice, did all the things you're supposed to do in Venice, obviously. There's Dorothy in the gondola. Got on the train, went back, spent a night, drove some more. Here we are on S50 in Slovenia. Just stopped at a random village and got a wonderful lunch. Drove a couple more hours. Now we're in 9 Alpha, Croatia. And there's a grocery store in Croatia. Bananas are bananas in any language. Drove a little further and found ourselves finally at the resort we had booked. This is a place called the Solaris Naturist Resort on the Adriatic coast. And if you want to ask me questions about that later, go for it, get me red face. We spent 2 delightful days here on the Adriatic. Those contraptions out on the water are climbing toys for kids. Way back, stopped in little old villages, and I ran into this guy that told me everything I didn't want to know and more and more and more about the history. Born and raised in this town of Bouget. And then finally back to Bologna. The traveling is over. Now it's time to get down to business. And I'm proudly holding the Europe car rental contract because, again, we did 800 miles, didn't put a scratch on that car, did the back roads, did the tollways, everything, absolute piece of cake. So now suddenly, for WRTC, we have no wheels, just turned in the car at the Bologna airport. And I started looking around for the supposedly arranged transportation from the airport to the WRTC site. And I had to look around pretty hard in the airport for about 20 minutes and finally found a guy holding a little sign, hand-lettered sign that said WRTC, and he led us out to this van. This fellow here is Sugar Papa 4 Zulu. They had just come off a flight from from Warsaw, and he recognized me and started chatting me up about some friends we have in common. So very welcoming. You know, the minute you hit the ham radio fraternity, you have friends and people that you know. About 50-minute ride to the town that was the venue, the headquarters venue for WRTC, about 30 miles southeast of Bologna in beautiful farm countryside. And we're checking into our hotel. There are 4 different hotels in close proximity that required that many buildings to host all the people, about 500 people involved in the event. So we got checked in and walked into town, wandered around a little bit. And now, finally, it's the opening ceremony. This time, no flags, no music, no signs, no nationalism. And part of that is a reflection of the state of the organization of the event. And part of it is a reflection of the world political situation right now. So after quite a bit of screwing around and several conflicting pieces of guidance about where and when the welcoming dinner would be, we finally found it. And they fed us outside late in the evening, very delightful venue by the pool at one of the hotels. Who knows this guy? K3LR.
K3LR, yeah.
Tim Duffy, yeah. Everywhere I go, Tim pops up. And he just popped up as a visitor, and he always seems to pop up with a gal. He had just driven down that day from Munich with this gal. There he was, just at the dinner, just observing the situation. The seating was random, and this is the fun in going to these events. We just picked a table and sat down, a round table, and started looking around and realized that we were all pretty much South America. Here on the left is Dorothy. The guy in the red shirt is from Chile. This fellow in the green shirt is from Chile. He has been to the Curacao place, Roberto. Here's a very famous contester, CX6 Victor Mike from Uruguay. Felipe NP4Z from Puerto Rico. Another Chilean, another Puerto Rican. So we had a grand time talking contesting, and particularly because we all live in approximately the same neighborhood in South America. A little bit later in the evening, this fellow here in the middle standing is the godfather of WRC 2022. This is Fabio Schettino, and he has done nothing but work this event for the last 4 years since Italy picked up the sponsorship. He said he retired a couple years ago, but he hadn't noticed because he's been absolutely, totally busy. And he was kind enough to come around and work the tables. And while he's standing here at this table, the guys at my table are trying for all the world to wrench some information out of him about what would be the format of the special call signs. Because at this point, on Tuesday evening of the event week, we had no idea what the special call signs would look like. And we got nowhere. We did not get an iota of data out of Fabio, but neat guy, fun to meet. And that was the end of the dinner. Next day, a lot of people went on tours, especially tours to the Marconi Museum and home. But boy, I tell you, those tours were really expensive. And we were still kind of pooped out. So we stuck around and just wandered. Here's an interesting vanity plate from the UK. I don't know how this guy got that, but there you go. We wandered into the village, and I stumbled on a friend from Youngstown, Ohio, K3LA, that I've been to dinner together with many times back there. There's probably nobody on the hook here who has not worked Echo Yankee 8 Mike Mike. No dear. This is one of the best known call signs on the planet. He's everywhere all the time, including Bouvet. He was on that expedition. And he is the photographer of WRTC. The event in Moscow, he was all over the place all the time shooting photos. And same thing here in Italy, here at the opening ceremony. So I turned the tables on Nodir and got a photo of him. This is the seating at the opening ceremony, which was, again, very muted and really not particularly well organized. In fact, we were all standing outside that morning, hordes and hordes of people trying to figure out where the opening ceremony was. Which building, which door, what time. It wasn't in any of the printed literature. And so Dorothy, not being shy, started asking around some of the hosts. They said, oh yeah, it's in thus and such building and thus and such room. And she told me about that, and I went around and just started herding people with my best drum major's voice. This is where we got to go, guys. And it took about 20 minutes, and we got 600 people into the room. So there was a lot of confusion about the what and when. Here's a famous face, Dick Norton, N6AA. we're practically neighbors here in the West, but we got to go to Europe to get to see him now and then. He was one of the judges, and Dick's claim to fame is that he's operated the CQ Worldwide Contest from every one of the world's 40 zones. There's only one other guy that's ever done that, and he's a silent key. And now Dick's in the process of making his way around the 40 zones again, second time around at age 82. A very good friend of mine that probably all work, Sugar 50 Romeo, Leo Choco. Leo's been to the place in Curacao, and we spent a lot of time hanging out with Leo and his wife in Moscow, and we had the pleasure of dinner with him again. You can see from the orange shirt that he's also a referee for the event. Interesting license plates. It's very easy for foreign hams to get call signs here in the States. So here's an Italian ham that's done that. This is at the John, obviously, at dinner at one of the hotels. And take a minute to study that. I just laughed out loud and had to shoot a photo. Everybody's welcome, including folks from other planets in this restroom. The WRTC teams are mostly chosen through operating excellence, over the 4 years preceding the event. But there are also some youth teams that are chosen because they're youth, and they've shown some facility on the air. Here's the youngest operator. The gal is EI5 Lima, Megan from Ireland. She's 16, and her operating partner is 18 from Germany. So it was a thrill, absolute thrill for me to meet those people. And here now, next day, finally, the organizational meeting. The orange people are referees, the yellow ones are competitors, the people in blue are judges. There are a bunch of spectators in the back of the room. And the idea here is to go over the rules, handle questions, make sure everybody understands the sequence of events for the weekend. And it was absolutely horrible because Fabio was up front trying to talk, and these guys would not shut up. The room was disorderly. It was really embarrassingly discourteous. In fact, I was so upset that I wound up leaving a little bit early, but they did manage to announce which referees were going to go with which operators. And I think you can see there in the middle of the screen that my call sign PJ2DX, I was assigned to referee the Poland team. And I thought that was pretty cool because I'm a graduate of a place called Poland High School in Poland, Ohio, 1967. And the referee pairings with the teams are done thoughtfully, not randomly by the event organizers, because they don't want, a Polish referee to be assigned to the Polish team and so forth. And so based on resumes and call signs, we are assigned not randomly, but systematically. So I got the Poland guys. And even as Fabio is going through these announcements, it's almost impossible to hear him because of the racket in the room. And 20 minutes short of the end of the meeting, I got up in disgust and just walked out. European license plates are interesting. You see on the left there the ring of stars, the gold stars to represent the nations of the European Union, and then a letter underneath, D for Germany. And here's a German that's managed to get obviously a really neat vanity plate on his Audi. Here's a ring of yellow or gold stars, and the HR connotes Croatia. And this Croatian guy was not able to get a call sign, a vanity call sign, but he was able to buy a decal, and he put 95X on his car. Here's a Slovenian, Sugar 53 Zulu Oscar with a dual motor Tesla, and a really pretty cool vanity plate. So it's fun. This event is really international. There are some 70 countries represented. We all speak the same language of amateur radio, and most everybody speaks enough English to get by. So if you think the Dayton Hamvention or Visalia is fun, you wouldn't believe this event because the whole world is there. I just grabbed this picture because of the celebrity power here. You all have been around the contesting world, most of you, for a while. Couldn't believe this. On the left, this is Randy Thompson, K5 Zulu Delta, who's won everything there is to win for decades. And for a good many years, he was the contest editor for CQ magazine. Felipe NP4Z, loud voice from Puerto Rico. Andy Blank, N2NT. The fellow standing in the black shirt is Tom, W2 Sugar Charlie, better known as the voice of Barbados. He's been operating single op from Barbados for years and years and years, and he's just got a new, even better place. And this guy's able to run 275 or so CWQs an hour. Also recently retired CEO of a $6 billion company, NetApp. So he has resources, but you wouldn't know it. The absolute nicest guy you would ever want to meet. Fellow in the white shirt, seated, Doug Grant, K1DG, the well-known author. He was the organizer of WRTC when we had it in the States in 2014. And next to him, Tim Duffy, of course, he's everywhere, K3LR, CEO of DX Engineering, which you don't want my life. DX Engineering is 3 miles from where I live in Ohio. So the temptation is enormous to run down there and go to the showroom every day. And then there's Bernie again, K3LA. Bernie and Duffy and I have, again, shared country club dinners many times in Youngstown. Referees meeting. And this was a little bit embarrassing and frustrating, too, because the referees were asking questions. Fabio was answering them, mostly not really correctly. And then Rusty, the chief judge, W608T, kept getting up and clarifying. But we got through it, and all the questions got answered. Now, finally, it gets interesting. Friday morning. And it's finally time to find out which site we're going to go to, what our call sign is going to be, and to hit the road and get to the site. Weather was beautiful all week. Here we are, a cool Friday morning, about 75 degrees outside one of the 4 hotels. And we made our way inside for the draw. And so here now begins the random process of picking chits out of a hat to find out who is going to go where. Just before they did that, Fabio finally revealed the call signs. And as you see here, they're all of the format Italy, digit, and then an alpha character, 4 characters. He said they tried to pick them so they were all about the same length on CW. Now, at the time these call signs were revealed, we still didn't know who was who, but at least we knew what the format of the call signs was going to look like. And then finally, it's hard to see the little black head behind the podium. There's a 5-year-old girl, a granddaughter of one of the Italian organizers, starts pulling envelopes out of the hat there, out of the bin. And only then do you find out which site you're going to get. She's pulling a site name and a call sign tab, and those get put together. And let me go back. I was very fortunate that my team was the 9th of 58 drawn. And so as soon as we were drawn, we were told we were going to go to site FE09, which meant nothing to us. And we were told to beat feet over to the organizing center at one of the other hotels and get our site kit and our box and all the equipment and everything that we needed to go to that site. And just prior to leaving this venue here, my Polish team leader stuck his hand down in the other red bucket and pulled out a black envelope and handed it to me. And that's the call sign that here on Friday morning, I'm not allowed to reveal until, again, 15 minutes before the contest Saturday afternoon. So now we wander 25 minutes over to the point of issuance of the site kits. And here we have chaos. Now, 58 teams, right? And it had taken about 30 minutes for this fellow in the gray shirt to issue the first of 58 site kits. And people were not really thrilled. This is from my position at 9th in line, turning around, looking backwards at the line. And if I was 9th, you can imagine how long this went around the corner and down the hallway. And I was to meet my site manager here at the site. He wasn't there yet, so I had to go inside and cool my heels. And then finally, this guy in the gray shirt and the glasses pops his head through the door. Hi, Geoff, I'm Ugo. I'm your site manager. And he turned out to be the nicest person, one of the highest quality human beings I've ever met. We had a great time together, and there you can see the cardboard box. And if you're really good, you can see PJ2DX and W0CG on the site, and our site name and number and the call signs of our Polish operators. We finally got the box, and we've been released to go after a long, long delay. And all I could think about is, if I'm 9th, what about all those other guys that are behind me? So now we take the site box and walk another 20 minutes to one of the other hotels. And here is the chaotic scene. The 2 guys in yellow shirts are my Poland operators. Behind them are 6 or 7 other of their friends from Poland that had come to help and spectate. There were 3 or 4 more Poland vehicles out in the parking lot with all kinds of wives and friends. There's Ugo, my site manager, in the glasses, and Dorothy in front. And I'm saying goodbye to her because she's not allowed at the site. I won't see her for a couple of days. And I'm waiting for something to happen. And I finally just had to sort of organize cats and say, come on, guys, grab your stuff out to the parking lot in the cars. Let's go. Let's get to the site. And little by little, I got people in cars and all pointing in the same direction. And we had the address of the place we were going to go. And Google Maps works perfectly in Europe. And so off we go. I hopped in the car with Hugo and we headed to the site. So now about the sites. This is amazingly interesting. Some years back, the Italian government and Chamber of Commerce decided to try and promote agro-tourism. And what that means is they did what they could to convince farmers way out in the countryside to establish bed and breakfast operations, partly to boost, the farmers' revenue and partly just to get the people out of the cities and out into the farm country and just to improve relations, rural versus urban all around. And there's the sign that we were met with when we pulled into our site for the Agriturismo initiative. And we were lucky enough to not only get an agri site, but to get this beautiful spot. This is the bed and breakfast where we're going to operate from and where we're going to spend a couple of nights. Absolutely heart-stoppingly gorgeous. And there is the antenna and the tower all ready for us. And again, imagine the logistics, because here we have this site and there are 57 others where the wire antennas and the beams and all the coax and bounds and everything had to have gotten put up several days before. Internet connectivity established, AC power established at every one of these sites. Now, this is not the tents in Russia. So these sites are probably not quite co-equal as they were in Russia. But this was the way the Italian organizers decided to run it. And you can see it couldn't have been more gorgeous. This is Friday about noontime when we arrived at the site. The contest doesn't start until Saturday at 2 p.m. Immediately, we were shown where we're going to operate from. And here's Christoph, SP7 Golf India Queen, the Poland team leader, sitting down and scoping out the desk. Where we're going to put the gear? Do we have enough room? I think you can tell from looking around that this used to be an old tack room. And it's been fixed up dramatically for the bed and breakfast customers, of whom we were 3 for the weekend. Now, the trouble was, nothing had been done about food. And we'd had breakfast at the site, the organizing site, and then driven 50 minutes to this agri site. What's to eat? This is a bed and breakfast, but we've got lunch to worry about. And so Ugo and I hopped in his Ford and we trekked 6 kilometers over to the little town of Maggiore and picked up groceries. And by the time we got out of here, he had pretty much charmed this checker. I thought she was going to come home with him. And he insisted on picking up the cost of the groceries out of his pocket. I had my hand in my pocket on my credit card. He said, nope, I'm doing this. He said, what difference will a few euros make to me in my life? And so we took all these groceries that we picked up at this little store in this little town back to the site. And while we had been shopping, obviously the Poland team had been setting up their gear. 2 stations, the triplexers, the power supplies, multiple computers, all set up and pretty much ready to go while we'd been gone. The guys at the desk at the left are a couple of the Poland hams that had come to assist. And that's allowed, the team competitors allowed to have any kind of help they want, including paid professional technical consultants if they want to do that. And so these Poland guys had a lot of assistance. Now, these people are required to leave the site when the actual competition comes, but they're a huge help in terms of tech support prior to the competition. And here's Ugo, my site manager, working with Borislaw, one of the 2 Poland operators, having a ball trying to figure out how to communicate with no language in common. And I found this Monopoly game. I'm not sure how much fun that would have been, but if we'd gotten desperate to pass time, we could have done it. And after the setup, we just began getting to know each other. Here on the left again is the Poland team leader, Christoph, and a couple of guys that had come down with him from Warsaw to help out, Alexander, SQ9UM, and Peter, SQ9 Delta. And I noticed Peter was driving a 2-motor Tesla. And I asked him about it, and he said, hey, come on, let's go for a ride. And by the time we got done with that, we were friends, and I was ready to go out and buy a car. So now lunch is worked out because we went to the store to get lunch. Now it's time for dinner. And the organizers had given each site manager 100 euros to do something somehow at the site for dinner. So it's Italy, you get pizza. And so I got back in the car and drove another 6 kilometers and went to little town of Maggiore again, this little neighborhood pizzeria, and picked up 5 pizzas to go back to the site. Well, turns out the Italians don't know how to make pizza. And I knew something was wrong when these 5 custom pizzas came out in about 5 minutes after we'd ordered them. And there's not much to them, not much food value. They weren't very tasty. Marek sitting there in the back, the guy of some dimension, also from Warsaw, put away 2 of those pizzas before the rest of us even got our Cokes open. But this was dinner. It was better than nothing. And I went hiking a little bit, and just immediately outside the door of our site, it looks like Iowa, looks like Illinois. You can see the pivot irrigators going in the evening, tall corn, irrigation systems, very advanced, large-scale mature agriculture. So we spent the night, and about 2 hours before the contest, I called a meeting of all the people, the site manager and the operators and the helpers that were around, just to be sure that we were all squared away on the rules and who's going to do what. And in the process of that, I reminded them that they needed to provide me with 3 USB memory sticks right after the end of the contest so I could turn in the logs. And they panicked. The Polish guys panicked because they had always only brought 1 memory stick. So the site manager, Ugo, called our hostess, Lucia, on the phone. Where close by can we find some memory sticks? She told us about this Chinese everything store in the village. And so we hopped in the car again and drove again to Maggiore and picked up 3 USB sticks. And I picked up the tab for those as a gift to the Poland team and ran back. And now it's just about time to start. And here we have an interesting contrast of personalities. This chap, Sugar Papa 7, Italy Victor Oscar, Borislaw, is quiet, contemplative, hands folded, ready to go, everything prepared for the competition and relaxing. And meanwhile, in contrast, his team leader is frantically working outside, fidgeting about this and fidgeting about that. And he decided he didn't like the coax route, so he took all the coax apart, rerouted around the towers, hooked everything back up the way he wanted it. And it's 94 degrees. And 1:30 in the afternoon, and the contest is going to start in 15 minutes. And he's still fidgeting. But finally, it's almost time to go. Whoop, let's fidget some more and fidget some more. And while they're fidgeting, we realized that we were going to need some more food. Back to the grocery store again, 12-kilometer round trip. Arguments again with Ugo about who's going to pick up the tab. He finally wound up winning. He picked up the tab again for all the groceries in this store. Here's SP7 Kilo Romeo Andy from Lodz, Poland. Made friends with him. Marek, absolutely great guy. The smile on his face says everything. And he was just thrilled to meet PJ2T as I was to meet him. And now the big moment. It's exactly 15 minutes before the contest starts, which here is very, very early in the local morning, but over there it's 1:45 on Saturday afternoon. And finally, I'm able to hand the sealed envelope containing the call sign to the team. And Christoph hurriedly opened it up, and there's the call sign they drew, Italy 46 Queen. Now, again, the reason they do this, the reason they're so secretive about which call sign goes with which team, is if, for example, the word gets out that a particular call sign is the China guys, then what happens is cheerleading. The China hams all circulate that information around the internet. I-47 Mike is our guy, is our team. And so the Chinese all pile on, and that results in quickly unbalanced, unfair competition. So these call sign assignments are guarded very, very carefully. Pretty elaborate station, and one of my duties as referee was to make sure that the station was hooked up correctly. The teams provide their own gear. The organizers provide a calibrated watt meter to be sure that neither station ever exceeds 100 watts, even 100 watts peak on SSB, that the triplexer is as it should be. And so that was one of my duties, and it was all fine. Time came to start, and it took these guys about 3 minutes to start making contacts. They had sort of messed up a couple of the macros. They were using N1MM for some reason, very unusual for a contest in Europe. But they finally got it going. And this is a true two-station competition. Each guy has his own radio and his own computer, obviously. Each guy can pick the band that he wants. The only restrictions are not both allowed to be on the same band at the same time, and you wouldn't want to be anyway. And with the triplexer, it's possible to work 10 meters on the beam and 20 meters on the beam on the same feed line all at the same time. And so how do you compete in WRTC? What's it take to win? Well, obviously you got to go fast. Rate matters. Obviously you have to be accurate. Accuracy matters enormously. But then beyond that, you've got to make the right decisions about which band to be on, at which time of the day, and almost in which hour, where to point the antenna, when to get on sideband, when to get on CW. And so there are a lot of variables at play that make this a lot of fun and make it a real challenge to be the winner. Now, I'm going to pretend that somebody asked me, well, geez, Geoff, how come you weren't a competitor? And the answer is that I was not willing to work every single contest as a single op for 4 years in order to get the points together to get into the competition. But had I been there, I would have done some things differently. For starters, I would have had a 3-ring binder, and the 3-ring binder would have had 24 pages in it, one per operating hour. And those pages would have been divided into 15-minute segments. And we would have had a very carefully designed plan for which band to be on which radio, every 15-minute segment of the day, where to point the antenna in order to maximize score, when to be on sideband, when to be on CW. And lots of study and analysis. You could have built that book. These guys just sat down and went. No notes, no plan, off they went. Nice guys, good fast operators, highly accurate, but kind of winging it. Here's what the log looks like. As I said, these guys chose to use N1MM. And I think you're all aware that around the world, there are IARU headquarters stations that all sign something with the HQ suffix. And you get points for working those headquarters stations. And so there's one that these guys worked. Here's another headquarters. Here's the Ireland headquarters station. And we were also on in Curacao as a headquarters station right there. Papa Japan 2 Hotel Quebec was really PJ2T. And Kate and D, Geoff was there running the CW part. And my friend Uli, the nut that he is, flew all the way over from Germany for a 4-day weekend to operate the sideband part of PJ2 Hotel Quebec in this contest. That's a lot of traveling for a 4-day weekend and a 24-hour contest. But he's nuts, and Uli's a lot of fun. He's a bachelor, and he can do that. It was fun for me to listen to the contest and watch the call signs go by. There's somebody, Gary got in a log on CW on 15 meters. Below him is another contest station. And while that was all going on Saturday afternoon, again, just literally right outside the door, this is what it looked like. Beautiful, placid farm scenery. And then back to the fray. Now it's a little bit later in the afternoon. Here's a good friend of mine, Kate, Alpha Zulu in the log in Ohio. Plugging away, making decisions about, again, which band, where to point the antenna, what to work. And as the hours went by, I started to get worried that these guys had not done any SSB. Now it's night. This is the lounge area at the B&B. And yeah, I'm not required to listen every minute to both transmitters, even though I could have. So I'm out wandering around a little bit, just trying to stretch my legs. It's sun's going down. There's the rail line not far from the farm. And looking back, here's the site. This is the building we were operating in. You can just barely see the antenna. And now back to the contest. And now you can see they're beginning to mix 15 and 20, working the whole world. A little bit later in the evening now, 80 meters is coming into play. There's Gary on 20 meter CW at 2359 Zulu, which for us is really, really late at night. Then there's somebody else we recognize in the log, Fortino 26 CW, Randy. And this guy jacked in 4 of you know him well. So it's fun to be a spectator, to listen to all your friends' call signs go by and compare the signals. Here's somebody else we know, N7 Whiskey Alpha in the log on 20 meter CW. And UA4M, I know this guy. So It's a good time. But again, look down the mode column. CWCW, still no sideband contacts. Now it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm managing to stay awake. Already 20's waking back up, 40's productive. The moon is high outside. It's a little bit chilly, so we close the doors. The contest is going on inside, and it's just quiet and placid and peaceful outside. There's a horse standing there wondering what the heck I'm doing wandering around at 3 in the morning. And now, well into the contest, we've got 3,000 contacts and still only 2 on SSB. Now, the SSB contacts not only count as much as CW, but they count a little bit more for QSO. And it seems to me that these guys are squandering an opportunity to harvest a lot of contacts and a lot of additional points. And they weren't spending a lot of time going after the US, because points outside of Europe, contacts count double outside of Europe, but they weren't chasing them. You can see here mostly European QSOs at let's see, this is 6 o'clock in the morning local time, and no SSB. And now it's Sunday morning. I went out and wandered a little bit more. There's a dressage equestrian operation going on at this B&B. And the kids come out from the city. They were just getting ready to start the deal. Here's the driveway out to the street. And I was tired of sitting all night and couldn't stay awake. So I wandered around just outside the gate to our site. This magnificent beauty, just walking up the road. Beautiful. This is a farmhouse, believe it or not. Just magnificent, well manicured. Notice the sides of the road, carefully mowed. And there's a site that looks like it could be in the Palouse. And flat as far as you can see in all directions. Another house in the neighborhood. The kitchen at the B&B, and then finally back to the site, and it's over. And in fact, Borgeslaw decided it was over before it ended. It's about 3 minutes to go, and he's had it. He's up out of the chair celebrating, arms in the air. And Christoph is still head down, trying to get a couple, 3 more contacts. And then it's done. As abruptly as the contest begins, at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, everything is over. And these guys start tearing the equipment apart. I copied all the log files and the audio files that are required to record both radios, the entire contest, off the computers, threw those USB sticks in my pocket, and Hugo and I hopped in the car and headed the 50-minute drive back to headquarters, because we wanted to be at the front of the line for turning these doggone memory sticks in. And again, these guys are tearing down, and concurrent with the end of the contest, these 2 guys and another one out of the picture, these are Italian volunteer hams arrived out of nowhere to begin taking down the antenna and tower. Now, picture that. This is happening concurrently in 58 sites, all within about a 100-mile circle of Bologna. It's a lot of volunteers, a lot of coordination, a lot of logistics, and a lot of money to stage this operation. So we're in the air-conditioned car running home, and these guys are busting it. And again, 96 degrees on Sunday afternoon to tear things apart. And we made it. Here's Hugo. We were almost at the head of the line. There's Fabio again. I don't think he ever slept. And here's how I knew we were at the right place. This is a professionally designed sign put together. And we turned in the sticks, and the log checking began. 58 stations turned in all their logs, and then the judges and the software went heads down to work to check the logs, look for cheating, make corrections, and come up with a really, really fair evaluation of who placed when. And so while they were working, we got to play. And Dorothy and I went to dinner. This was a dinner that was provided for us. On Sunday evening at one of the hotels, I met these 2 guys who came and sat down at our table. These are licensed hams from Slovenia, Sugar 52 guys. The guy on the left, Ejik, is 14, and he's a high-speed CW fanatic. And his friend Jacob on the right is 22, and he's finished up a master's degree in physics. And so if you think we're good in the States, they're better in Europe. There's a lot more radio operation in Europe. There's a lot more CW. The activity level is much higher. The level of technical sophistication of the licensees over there is very, very high. I mean, this guy's 14, and we had a fantastic, interesting time chatting with them. And by the way, letter perfect English. What was their role at the competition? There wasn't one. They had simply driven down from Slovenia to volunteer. And they said they'd been there for the whole week out of their pocket, paying for a hotel room to volunteer. And they were only given one job that took up about an hour. Right outside the main hotel was this sign-up tab, this poster. And we all had a good time putting our John Henrys on this thing. And I'm going to have to rush by this, but you could stare at this for half an hour and not see everybody. And the call signs, again, and the internationalism of this event is just mind-boggling. It's absolutely more exciting to meet these people than it is to do the competition. Finally now, Monday evening, time for the closing ceremony. And again, at this closing ceremony, there were no musicians. There was no fancy music. There were no flags. There were no country signs. And the reason they did that was because of the war in Ukraine. And as it happened, after all the evaluation and all the contest checking and all the log checking, the winners were the Ukraine team. They got the gold. And all of us were secretly, quietly cheering and jumping up and down inside and applauding for them. But this celebration was very muted. You can see there's television coverage, and the event was live streamed all over the world. And they're up front in the yellow shirts of the Ukraine guys getting their gold medals and the recognition they deserved. But there were 4 or 5 Russian teams in the room, and there were quite a few other Russian volunteers in the room. And everybody was getting along okay, but we didn't want to overdo it. The Italian volunteers sure didn't want to overdo it. And so it was kind of quiet. During this closing ceremony, they stopped the event for a moment. And on the PA system, over the telephone, comes on Guamelio Marconi's daughter. Unbelievable. Up in her 80s now. And she spoke to us for about 5 minutes. Absolutely gracious and inspiring. The daughter of the founder of radio. And that was tears and goose pimples time for me. Absolutely incredible. I didn't get very good pictures of the closing ceremony because everything was happening fast. We had a dinner late in the evening. Again, a chance to meet more people. The fellow in the yellow shirt is a German ham. His name is Frank. And finally, about halfway through the dinner, I had to ask this guy, how did you develop letter perfect English? Because this guy has no accent, zero, nothing. The language skills in Europe just blow us away. And so I asked him, and he just laughed and said, thank you very much, and immediately switched into English with a heavy German accent. He says, you'll see, I can turn it on and I can turn it off. And then he switched back to perfect English, and he said, I just watch TV, and learn how to speak correctly, and that's how we do it. Those of you that run RTTY will know this guy in the orange. This is Ed Munns, W0 Yankee Kilo, sort of the international god of radio teletype, who in the competitions is known for running 3 stations at once, 48-hour single op from Aruba. So he wins consistently. I wandered around a little bit at the closing ceremony. This is a table full of my new friends from Poland. And there was another table also full of my new friends in Poland. And I know people there, have friends there, have invitations to come visit. It's wonderful. And so we went back to the hotel room and slept and got up at 10 minutes to 5 in the morning. No, got up at 3:15 in order to meet a bus at 4:50. Went out to the Bologna airport, boarded this flight, launched out of Bologna at 7:50, and flight to Heathrow. Here's the horrible experience, which is boarding an international flight at London Heathrow. Endured the flight to Dallas. Spent the night. Next day, we did a little touring around in Fort Worth. Dorothy didn't love it, 109 degrees. But Dorothy's a museum professional, so we felt it necessary to do that. And here we are waiting for our ride to the airport, a Lyft ride. These are the 2 little carry-on bags. We traveled light, lived out of those for 20 days. And against 109 degrees, Dorothy's hiding under this little tree, and enough's enough. She's ready to go home. So 11 days touring, 9 days at the event, lots of new friends, thrills at every turn, and a new respect for Italy, Europeans generally, and for the European, particularly Eastern European hams. Tremendous experience. We were glad to be home, but we would do it again.